Hello friends, in my last attempt to get connected through net or distance learning attempt, I have tried to cover the last head of income, that is income from other sources. And with that, we completed our discussion on all heads of income, namely income from salary, income from house property, profits and gains of business or profession, capital gains, and lastly income from other sources. So all incomes earned by an assessee under these various heads, after claiming the rightful deductions and exemptions under those heads and the provisions of Income Tax Act, if you take sum total of the income under all these heads, will lead to gross total income, and from there the assessee can claim deductions under chapter 6A from 80C to 80U, and that will derive the net taxable income in the hands of assessee, on which assessee is called upon to pay tax. Now friends, having got the background and operating provisions of various heads of income and tax, net tax to be payable on net taxable income in the hands of assessee, you feel bad when you are supposed to pay tax, because it is an outflow. It goes out from your pocket, and when anything is going out from your pocket, naturally there is a feeling of regret that I have to pay tax. Then if you try to think that how I will try to minimize this tax payable, naturally an individual or an assessee's thought process will try to go on those lines, that if I earn one more rupee as taxable income in my hands, straight away it is liable for additional tax, and additional tax burden is saddled on the assessee. So to do away with that tax burden, if our brain starts thinking in the direction that I would like to have income, may not be directly in my hands, but in the hands of somebody on whom I have entire control, means the income is received by somebody else on that income I have control, or on that person I have control. So effectively it is my income received in somebody else's hands. Yes, logically, if you are trying to think so, to minimize your tax burden, then the first person coming to your mind should be who? Yes, you are right. Take my case. In my case, I am taxable in the highest taxable income tax bracket, that is say 30%. Then 1 rupee additional earned by me will disincentivize me, because 1 rupee additional earned by me, effectively I will earn only 67 paisa. 67 paisa. Why? Because 30% tax and 10% surcharge, 33% have gone. So 67 paisa only I will receive from additional 1 rupee. So I will get disincentivized to earn 1 rupee more than my existing level of income. But still my urge to earn more income persists and continues. With an intention to pay minimum tax, I will try to think that can I divert my income to somebody else? Can I divert some income to somebody else's hands? And who could be that else? Yes, you are right. Your guess is right. It could be none else than Mrs. Prabhupada. Because generally it is said that if you divert income to your wife, then we have a presumption that we have control on our wife. So naturally if wife receives that income in her hands, then she will be liable to pay tax on that income, assuming it is her income. But in fact or de facto, it is an income diverted by me to her, with the intention that I have control on her. Correct? You have control on your spouse or wife. In fact, it is other way around. But still, if you have that opinion that you have control on that income and that person, then naturally you should aim to divert that income to that other person, namely wife, or if not, then somebody else in your relation, right? So, if such fraudulent thought process comes to our mind, which we may think that it is going to be a tax planning or kind of a tax evasion or tax avoidance, whatever it is, whatever name you call, but the methodology, whatever you resort to, either evasion, avoidance or planning, and try to minimize that tax in your hands by resorting to such means, then a word of caution from me. A word of caution that there are certain provisions under Income Tax Act which debar you from such thought process and activities. Yes, they debar you from that. Friends, Income Tax Act is a very deadly legislation. It has certain sections which prevent such kind of fraudulent ideas of diverting income. They are necessarily discussed from section 60 to section 64 under the clubbing provisions. They are popularly known as clubbing provisions. Today I am going to address to those clubbing provisions. So before you resort to minimize your income and minimize tax thereon in your hands by resorting to diverting income to somebody, you should be aware clearly about such provisions which intend to block you from doing such an activity. Okay, so with that background, we will go into the clubbing provisions. Right? Clubbing provision, section 60. Right? If you see the scheme of the Income Tax Act or the sections, you will appreciate it goes from section 60 to 64. 60 says transfer of income without transfer of assets. Transfer of income without transfer of assets. Friends, this is a general tendency to divert the income in somebody else's hand without losing control on that asset. Without losing control on that asset. Means you will try to retain control on that asset in your hands and try to divert income. How you can do that? If I give you an example, I think the point will reach home or it will get clarified. Suppose I have a flat in joint name with me and my wife, right? The property is registered in joint name, flat is in joint name with me, Mr. X and Mrs. X, correct? Or me and my wife. Now you approach me for seeking that property on rent. When taking it on the rent, I try to propose you, saying that you will pay the rental income to my spouse or wife. Correct? Because she is also a joint owner in the property. Her name also appears, so she is the owner. And as a prospective tenant, correct, or even licensee, you are merely interested in accommodation or the arrangement for accommodation. You are not that interested in knowing to whom you are paying the rent. So you may apparently agree to this proposal and enter into a live-in license agreement with my wife as a first name and my name as second. You will naturally draw a check, monthly rental check in the name of my wife. Now friends, what has happened? The flat is in joint name, my name first, wife's name second. However, while giving it out on the rent, with fraudulent intention, I have made you enter into a live-in license agreement and diverted the rent in the name of the first person mentioned in that leave and license agreement, that is my wife. So my wife gets it, that rent monthly from you. It is deposited in her bank account and I try to show it in her hands as her income and try to get her assessed from the income tax officer. If income tax officer detects this badmashi or this kind of nefarious activity, then naturally whether I have transferred that flat to my wife, whether my wife is the exclusive owner of the flat, no. However, she is receiving the rent. Means here what I am trying to do, I am trying to keep control on the asset called flat or the premises and trying to divert the income in the hands of my wife. Are you getting my point? Transfer of income without transfer of asset. Or I can give you another example. Maybe there is a joint account, bank account with me and my wife. My name is first, wife name is second. We approach the branch manager and in the same branch we open another joint account wherein my wife's name is first and my name is second. I have certain accumulated balance in my bank account, savings bank account, say 10 lakhs, and I convert out of that 10 lakhs, say 9 lakhs rupees as a fixed deposit. While making the fixed deposit, I make that fixed deposit in the name of my wife first and second joint name with me, and I put an instruction into that fixed deposit application form that quarterly interest to be credited to the SB account wherein my wife's name is first. Being branch manager known to us, having very good relations, business relations, and apparently there is nothing illegal, that there is a joint account from where the money is flowing, wherein my name is first and wife's name is second. We make a fixed deposit in the same bank, opening another saving bank account wherein wife's name is first and my name is second, and we give instructions to quarterly credit the FD interest to that other savings bank account wherein my wife's name is first. Friends, if you don't know this background and if you happen to be an income tax officer and assess my wife, apparently what feeling you will gather? That wife has earned income from investments called fixed deposit and it is credited directly to her account and naturally it will be assessed in her hands. But if you go to the root of the transaction, the origin of the transaction, you will find that the money has been transferred from my savings bank account wherein my name was first. It was my money. I have transferred it to wife. Right? And naturally, I tried to divert the interest, that is the income accruing on that FD, to my wife's hands. Then I am trying to divert income without transfer of asset. Then it will be hit by the provisions of section 60 and clubbing provisions will apply. The interest credited to my wife's SB account wherein her name is first will be assessed for income tax purpose in my hands. It will be added to my income and tax will be charged on my added income. Are you clear about the clubbing provisions? Section 60. Section 60, the logic, transfer of income without transfer of asset. Now, having come to know this, that transfer of income without transfer of assets, you say fine, if section 60 hits this, I will try to transfer the asset. To overcome the provisions of section 60, our next thought process for an Indian brain, sharp mind, is what? Fair enough. Section 60 prohibits me from doing that transfer of income without transfer of assets. Very well. To overcome, circumvent that provision of section 60, I will transfer the asset. But what type of transfer? Again, I always say, you may be reminded of that famous wording, Indian mind is always sharp, unbeatable and fraudulent. Correct? So, revocable transfer. Revocable. What do you mean by revocable? Concentrate on the word revocable. Section 61 says revocable transfer of asset. Revocable transfer of asset means you are temporarily transferring asset to somebody wherein you reserve right to revoke it. To reserve right to revoke or invoke back that transfer, and whatever assets you have transferred will get vested back to you on happening of certain event. Correct? Friends, generally I can give you an example from day-to-day life of emotional blackmailing done by close family members, seniors from family or parents, I would say. Okay, not all parents are like that, correct? But generally parents say that, yeah, if you marry the boy which I have found out for you, or a girl which I have found out for you, then only you will be given or provided with share in my property or this particular asset, or then only I will transfer this flat to you. If you decline for that, I will take back that transfer. Right? It is something like, if you don't do or perform a particular act, that asset will be revoked back to me. Right? So what is this type of a transfer? This is a revocable transfer. So in case of revocable transfer of assets, again the clubbing provisions will apply. And income from revocable transfer of assets will be taxed in the hands of transferor. Means if I have transferred an asset, income bearing asset of course, to a person, and that transfer happens to be a revocable transfer, revocable at a later date, then such revocable transfer assets or income earned from such revocable transfer of assets will be clubbed in my hands, transferor hands, and tax will be levied on them. Are you clear? Now there are exceptions. There are exceptions to this rule, section 61, and those exceptions to section 61 are mentioned in section 62. What section 62 says? Section 62 provides exceptions to revocable transfers. Now there are three exceptions provided under it. We will see one after the other. A, through trust. Now see how Indian mind works, how human mind works. Transfer, that too revocable transfer through trust, means you create an independent entity called trust, a third party. That trust, you will vest that asset or transfer that asset to that trust, and the income earned by that trust, correct, is received by who? Trust. That is the third party, and you are trying to transfer the asset with keeping control with you. That is a revocable transfer to the trust. So if you are trying to transfer income to a trust, third party, by way of resorting to revocable transfer, then if the revocable transfer is through trust, not revocable during the lifetime of the beneficiary, because the trust, third entity, is for the benefit of somebody, is for the benefit of some person, X person, other person, other than you. Then you are not directly transferring asset to that person. You are transferring it to a trust, that to a revocable transfer, and trying to transfer that income to the trust. If that transfer of asset to the trust is not revocable, cannot be called back till such time, lifetime of the beneficiary, means who is beneficiary under the trust. Correct? If you have created a trust for your child, say son, and the transfer of asset to the trust is not revocable during the lifetime of the beneficiary, means lifetime of your son, then clubbing provisions will not apply. Then the income will be taxable in the hands of trust only and not the transfer. But if you have made a revocable transfer to the trust, wherein the trust deed says clearly that the asset will be revoked back to the transferor during the lifetime of the beneficiary, correct? Then the clubbing provisions will apply. So revocable transfer to a trust with revocation during the lifetime of the beneficiary. If it is not revocable during the lifetime of the beneficiary, clubbing provisions will not apply. I hope I am clear. Second, in other case means not through trust, direct transfer. So you have transferred asset to your son and it is a revocable transfer. Then it is revocable transfer. and you have transferred asset to a son till such time not revocable during the lifetime of the transferee means son. You have transferred a flat to son and you say, my dear son, you continue to stay in that flat will belong to you till such time you are alive, you means son is alive. I will not revoke this transfer. And if son gives that flat on rent to somebody, the rent received by son will be taxed in the hands of son. Clubbing provisions will not apply. Why clubbing provisions will not apply? Because you have transferred an asset to your son, that is transferring. And while transferring that asset, you have put a condition that the transfer of flat will not be revoked during the lifetime of the transferee. Transferee is son. You are transferor, I am transferor, and son is transferee. Right? So if it is not invoked during the lifetime of the transferee, clubbing provisions will not apply. And lastly, C, transfer of assets executed prior to 1st April 1961. Friends, what is this great date, 1st April 1961? If you recall the discussion in the first lecture, when I started dealing with income tax with you, first lecture, I said this income tax legislation is called as Income Tax Act 1961. It shall come into effect from 1st of April 1961. So, if any transfer of asset has taken effect, has been executed prior to this date, 1st April 1961, then the clubbing provisions will not apply. If the transfer of asset has taken place prior to 1st April 61, revocable transfer, correct? Then, though it is a revocable transfer, clubbing provisions will not apply. Clear? A, B, C. These are the exceptions for revocable transfer. Now friends, we come to the interesting section, section 64. Section 64, 1 small Roman 2 deals with remuneration to spouse. Remuneration to spouse. Spouse means for a husband, wife, and for wife, a husband. So if there is a remuneration received by a spouse from the business, then it will be clubbed in the hands of another spouse. Right? It will be clubbed in the hands of the spouse. That is, if I am a proprietor, I have employed my spouse, that is my wife, Mrs. Prabhupada, and she gets salary from that firm, correct? Partnership firm or a proprietary concern. Then that particular salary received by Mrs. Prabhupada will be clubbed in the hands of spouse. Right? So remuneration received, remuneration to spouse will be taxed in the hands of, if wife is getting the remuneration, it will be taxed in the hands of husband. If husband is a proprietor, or if the husband is having controlling interest in the business or having substantial interest in the partnership firm, if he is a partner. So partner's wife gets some remuneration, then it will be clubbed in the hands of that partner. Am I clear? So remuneration to the spouse. However, there is exception. However, there is an exception. What is that exception? That if remuneration is paid to spouse, where spouse has got some technical qualification, and that salary or remuneration is due to the spouse because he or she owns that technical qualification. Just to give you an example, assume I am a surgeon and I am having a nursing home wherein I carry out operations. Now, if I have employed my wife over there, that is Mrs. Prabhupada, and she also happens to be a doctor. So when I operate a patient, after that I go for another operation to another hospital, and in my nursing home when patient is lying on bed, who takes care? Who is looked after? My wife looks after that patient. She attends to that patient in the capacity of a doctor. Correct? Then if she is getting remuneration, my wife, Mrs. Prabhupada, being a doctor, getting remuneration from a surgeon, Mr. Prabhupada, then clubbing will not apply. But if my wife is not a doctor, or if my wife is not a qualified nurse having nursing diploma or degree, right, and I have just engaged her as an employee like any other routine regular employee. So if she happens to be my wife, that is spouse, then that remuneration paid to her from my nursing home will be clubbed in the hands of Professor Prabhu, correct? Or the Dr. Prabhu. Am I clear? So if the spouse is having own technical education, holding a degree or diploma formally, and utilizing that knowledge for rendition of service, and for that she is getting rewarded, then clubbing provisions will not apply. Clubbing provisions will not apply. Am I clear? Yes. Then income from assets transferred to spouse. Section 64(1)(4), income from assets transferred to spouse. It is very interesting. When you try to transfer assets, generally you try to transfer assets to the person on whom you have control. So the first person comes to your mind is your spouse. That is, Mr. Prabhu Patil or Professor Prabhu Patil will transfer asset to Mrs. Prabhu Patil, assuming there is a control of Mr. Prabhu Patil. In fact, it is reverse, right? But still, if I have transferred assets to Mrs. Prabhu Patil and if she earns income, that I have transferred a flat to Mrs. Prabhu Patil, that flat is given on the rent by Mrs. Prabhu Patil, then that income will be clubbed in my hands because I have transferred an asset to my spouse. Now mark the words spouse. So if you transfer income from asset to transfer to a spouse, so income from asset transfer. So if you have transferred asset to spouse, spouse means wife, legally wedded wife. Here I am reminded of one beautiful case law which is pertaining to the old Income Tax Act, not Income Tax Act 1961. It is very old, 1922 Income Tax Act. Correct? Prior to 1961, there was a 1922 Income Tax Act which Britishers had made. Under that, there was a case law, and that case law is pronounced by Supreme Court of India. PJP Thomas, PJP, Philip John Plaskett Thomas versus Commissioner of Income Tax, Calcutta. It's a Calcutta-based case. And that case, it was interesting that PJP Thomas had transferred assets to one Miss X. And after transfer of assets to Miss X, he ensured that Miss X became Mrs. PJP Thomas. So, when income earned for those transferred assets in the hands of Mrs. PJP Thomas, income tax officer went to the origin of the transaction and he came to know that the assets are transferred by Mr. PJP Thomas to Mrs. PJP Thomas. Right? So, under that impression, income tax officer applied clubbing provisions under section 13 of Income Tax Act 1922, which are more or less similar to section 64. Correct? Transfer of assets to spouse. Income from assets transferred to spouse, section 13 under old act. Supreme Court said when the asset was transferred by Mr. PJP Thomas, Philip John Plaskett Thomas, to Miss X, at that precise point of time, she was Miss X and she was not Mrs. Thomas, not Mrs. PJP Thomas, and that's why clubbing provisions will not apply. Are you getting the interesting point? So, the sum of the stories, the moral of the stories, that you should transfer to asset to Miss X and ensure that Miss X becomes Mrs. You. Okay? Or vice versa. If honorable lady, she wants to transfer asset to a gents, she should ensure that she transfer the asset before marriage, and after transfer of assets, she marries that and ensures that that transferee becomes her husband without recourse to me. Without recourse to me. Because if you transfer asset to Miss X and Miss X becomes Mrs. Y, then you had it. So PJP Thomas will not apply in that case. Right? However, this PJP Thomas business, correct, or this case law effect is now more or less done away with. Because in my last lecture on income from other sources, we have discussed provisions under section 56(7) and 56(10), wherein you can transfer money or property without consideration to permissible degree of relationship, right? So permissible degree of relationship. So if you transfer to somebody who is your wife, then sky is the limit, right? So you can transfer under section 56(1)(7) or 10, right? And that will not be treated as income in the hands of donor or transferor. But here the issue is, if you transfer or happen to transfer the asset to Miss X, the limit given of 50,000 will come into play. Under section 56(1)(7) or 10, that limit of 50,000 rupees, transfer of money or property without consideration to a party not in proximate relationship. Those 7 relationships we saw in that lecture, from income from other sources, you may recall. So if you are transferring it to spouse, clubbing provisions will apply. If you want to circumvent clubbing provisions, so you resort to transfer to Miss X and ensure Miss X becomes Mrs. U, then also problem, because under section 56(1)(7), if you have transferred anything in excess of 50,000, it will be taxed as income in the hands of the person, right? So you will have to pay tax, right? So clubbing provisions and section 56 provisions put together have done away with that tax planning of PJP Thomas, right? But otherwise, PJP Thomas case is an excellent piece to interpret the word spouse, right? Then income from assets transferred to spouse, that is section 64(1)(4). Then coming to section 64(1)(6), income from assets transferred to son's wife. Friends, after wife, who is the next best person on whom you have control or you have good relationships? If you see psychologically, father-in-law and daughter-in-law, very good relations. Likewise, mother-in-law and son-in-law, good relations. Mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, friction. Generally, it is not, but that is the rule, correct? That is the rule, generally. So, if you intend the next person to whom assets are to be transferred after spouse in line, that is son's wife, that is daughter-in-law, then clubbing provisions will apply. Under section 64(1)(6), income from assets transferred to son's wife. Now, see how this section 60 to 64, how they are traveling. Transfer of income without transfer of assets, to circumvent that, you do revocable transfer. After doing revocable transfer, if revocable transfers are also arresting this kind of transfer of income, then you try to transfer remuneration to spouse. Okay, then you try to do income from assets transferred to spouse. Then income from assets transferred to son's wife. So if not spouse, then son's wife. Son's wife, if you transfer asset, if she earns income, clubbing provisions will apply. That income will be clubbed in your hands, right? So if we are directly transferring asset to spouse or son's wife, then clubbing provisions will apply. So human mind goes one step ahead, saying that, okay, fine, fair enough, I don't happen to transfer my asset to spouse or son's wife directly. I will go via an intermediary called trust, a third party, third entity called trust. So I will transfer asset to a trust, which is a separate entity having separate PAN number, separate identity. It is a separate person for income tax, and income will accrue to that trust via transfer of asset to that trust, and that income will be utilized for the benefit of spouse. So see, section 64(1)(7) talks of income from assets transferred to a person for benefit of spouse, So Professor Prabhu Patkar, creates a trust, wherein that trust, Mr. A, B, C are the trustees. I transfer asset to the trust. That asset, income bearing asset, generates income for the trust. It is taxable logically and generally in the hands of trust. But if the condition of trust is that income is to be utilized for the benefit of Mrs. Prabhupatta, that is transferor's spouse, then clubbing provisions apply. So either you try and directly transfer the asset to spouse, or you make an attempt of indirect transfer or via media transfer via third party, then also clubbing provisions will apply. See how income tax have tried to put claims. Income from assets transferred to person for a benefit of a spouse, or 8, that is 64(1)(a) talks of income from assets transferred to a person for benefit of son's wife. So either for benefit of spouse or for benefit of son's wife, the clubbing provisions will apply. Right? So we have seen from section 60 to 64. Now I come to section 64, 1 capital A, income of a minor child. It is again interesting. Friends, if you have done contract act by conducted by my co-faculty or by your other faculties in your curriculum earlier during your course of BCom or BMS, etc., under legal aspects, if you have done contract act, you will appreciate that a contract with minor is void. You cannot enter into a contract with minor. So you enter into a contract with a minor and minor earns income, then the clubbing provisions will apply. Clubbing provisions will apply. If minor child earns income, then that income will be taxed in the hands of parent. Which parent? The child is having two parents, father and mother, whosoever is having higher income. So minor child's income is, as a general rule of thumb, is added to the income of parent whosoever is having higher income. Right? So either in father's hand or mother's hand, it will be clubbed. Now, under section 10, there is a carve out. Section 10 deals with exemptions. Section 10, there is a carve out that if minor child's income is up to 1,500, then it is exempt. Then it is exempt under section 10. Then clubbing will not apply. Clubbing will not apply to the extent of 1,500. If it is less than 1,500, then also clubbing will not apply. If it exceeds 1,500, clubbing will apply. And it will be clubbed in the hands of a parent whosoever is having higher income. Now here, one beautiful exception is carved out. Again, in this section 64, 1 capital A, that if the income is earned by minor child by own exertion or by own talents, by exerting own talents or by exhibiting own talents. Just to give you an example, those reality shows which we see on television, Saregamapa or dance competitions, etc., right? Or shooting for a serial, TV serial or TV series, and cinematographic films wherein minor children, they play some act. Shooting is conducted and they are rewarded, right? They get some reward or they earn some income out of that activity, exploiting their own talent. Then such income, clubbing provisions will not apply. It is not clubbed in the hands of parents, right? It will be treated as minor child's income only. Clear? So that is income of a minor child. Now coming to the last section in this series, section 64(2). Here it talks of conversion of self-acquired property into joint family property and subsequent partition. See here how the Indian mind and brain works. See, interesting. I have dealt with you, friends, the concept of HCF while dealing with definition of the term person under section 2 subsection 31. We have seen person includes an individual. Next is HUF, Hindu undivided family. So Hindu undivided family, what is the concept? It is a joint family, right? Of members, all members, family members are co-personers, and if that family is having income, having independent PAN, having independent income tax assessment unit, and having independent income, and Karta of that family, correct? He is having independent PAN, he is an individual, and he is having separate property or separate income source apart from family income. And then he intends, with a fraudulent intention, he intends to blend his property, individual property, with joint family property, and then resorts for partition of the family. Hindu joint family or Hindu undivided family can be partitioned. Subsequently, it can be partitioned. That partition can be claimed by any of the co-parsoner. Co-parsoner means male member. So any male member asks for the division of Hindu undivided family. So after blending individual property with the Hindu undivided family property, it goes into a common hodgepodge or a common pool of the family property. And once it blends with family property, it becomes part and parcel of family property. And then a family property's division is resorted into, partition is resorted into. What is the result or what is the effect? During the course of partition of joint Hindu family property, some property which was originally blend from individual source to joint family property, that portion will go to other members other than the transferor. So you are trying to resort to a transfer of individual property by blending it with a joint Hindu undivided family property and then partition thereof, and trying to resort to partition that property and separate it in the hands of some other member or co-parsoner other than you, and trying to circumvent clubbing provisions. To circumvent this kind of a contorted thought, right, a complicated thought process, they have put section 64(2) in this place. And they say that if somebody resorts to converts his self-acquired property into a joint family property and subsequently resorts to partition and thereby indirect means trying to transfer individual property to somebody else, and thereby that income will be taxed in the hands of transferee, that particular provision, section 64(2) provision, will hit this kind of transaction or activity. Friends, I hope I have effectively demonstrated before you the danger prevailing in clubbing provisions. So before resorting to any means of transferring any asset or transferring any income with the ultimate intention to defraud revenue and reduce your taxability of income in your hands and income tax level or income tax outgo in your hands, please take into account the provisions of section 60 to 64 and then resort to such a step. I hope the point is well taken. Thank you for patient hearing.